Okay, so I'm going to do a third example now, which is similar to question 4 at the end of 221 lab this week. So do a third example. So, as I said, there's can be multiple ways to solve a problem. So I'm going to give you an example similar to number 4, question 4, but show you two different ways of solving it and getting to the correct answer. So we have a solution. In this case, we're going to have 50 milliliters, and it's going to be at a concentration of 40 milligrams per milliliter. And just through one dilution, we want to make this into 10 milliliters with a final volume of 10 milliliters and have a concentration of 4 milligrams per milliliter. So let me show you one way of doing this. So the first way of doing it is like we talked about in the previous example, which is C1V1 equals C2V2. Now, what's important here, you may think, well, we have C1 and we have V1 here, and we have C2V2 here. But actually, we don't actually know what V1 is, because V1 in this case is going to be the transferred volume. This volume here is irrelevant. So let's work out what this would be. So we are trying to solve for V1. So if we rearrange this equation, we get C2V2 over C1. And then if we plug this in, we're going to get 10 times 4 over 40. And very quickly, you can see this would be 40 over 40, which would be 1. So this would be 1 milliliter. So the transfer volume would be 1 milliliter, and then we have to make it up to 10 milliliters, so we have to add 9 milliliters of diluted. So that's one way of doing it using C1 versus V1. So let me do an example now of the same thing, but in a second way. So let me get rid of this. One way is we can figure out what mass we actually want. Actually, let me just, whoops. So we know this has a final mass. So if we want to work out the final mass, it's going to be mass equals concentration times volume. So this is going to give us 10 times, or I'm sorry, it's going to be 4 milligrams per milliliter multiplied by 10, which is going to give us 40 milligrams. So we want a final mass of 40 milligrams within this. Okay, so then what we want to do is solve the volume. So if you remember, volume is mass over concentration. So we know we want 40 milligrams divide, and we know the concentration of the stock is 40 milligrams. So again, this will give us our answer of 1 milliliter. So this will be 1 milliliter. And again, we're going to add our 9 mil. So a couple of different ways to get to it. Either way is fine. There's also ways to do it as a dilution factor. As I said, whichever way works best for you. One thing I haven't actually mentioned, and I normally belabor, is I always recommend, even in something that you think is very simple, is draw it out. Draw it out, write your concentrations down, write your volumes down, write your transferred volumes down. If you're doing a dilution factor, write your dilution factors down, because they are going to really help you and avoid you making what can be silly mistakes.